Welcome. You're all very welcome here this evening. I'd just like to say before I introduce the people we're really here to hear a few words from, that it's actually been an incredible and amazing year, and I was thinking about that this afternoon because this afternoon I spent a couple of hours glued to my computer watching everything that was happening in the Abbey Theatre today. The incredible Waking the Famous event, which was thrilling and exciting and inspiring, and it struck me that, I don't actually think that event would have happened, or that sort of movement would have exploded so quickly and so powerfully were it not for the fact that the Yes Equality campaign has sort of engendered in this country at the moment a real passion for equality on all levels. And so I think, this book here, which I know you all have copies of already, that this book here tells the story of the Yes Equality campaign, but in a weird way I think the story's not over yet. I think the effect of this campaign is still ongoing, and I expect there'll be a sequel to come. I'm looking at Gráinne there, because she's the real hard worker, She's the one who's bashing it out on the typewriter night after night. While Brian is shouting instructions down the phone. So we're going to get straight to it. So first of all, we're going to have a word from Mr. Conor Graham from Marion Press to have his bit about it. And he's a very handsome man, but I've already investigated, and he's a heterosexual. And his two daughters are here to prove it.
And my son.
And your son, huh? Let's talk.
Okay.
Please welcome Conor.
Thanks very much indeed, Panti. There's quite a bit of uncertainty about tonight's event, actually, mostly around just how many people were actually going to turn up and whether this room would be big enough to hold everyone, and whether one cubic ton of wine would be enough, or whether we'd need two. But one thing I know for certain is that you didn't come here to listen to me tonight, so I shall be very brief, and then we can get on to the more important people involved in this wonderful book, and to our very special guest speaker. First and foremost, I do need to thank the literary agent Jonathan Williams for coming to me with the proposal for the book in the first place. Jonathan called me back in June about a very exciting book that he had, which he wanted published this autumn. And my first thought was, thanks but no thanks, we're fully booked, no more publishing slots available, and sure, you couldn't publish a book in such a short space of time anyway. Then when he told me what the book was and who it was by, and I was like, Jonathan, what are you doing to me? How can I say no? And it was too good to be true, and I was committed there and then. And not for the first time in this extraordinary campaign, the answer was a very firm yes. But when we did sit down on the 22nd of June, and I did have to check my diary on that just to see how recent it was. So yes, we sat down on the 22nd of June to talk about a plan for publishing the book, and I discovered it wasn't even written. And so suffice to say, the blood pressure rose further, and I really wondered what I was letting myself in for, and how wrong I was. The book was written, edited, designed, images selected, sorted, and off to the printers within 3.5 months. Often the length of time that it takes some publishers just to reply to the email from an author. So I think we're looking at some kind of record here. And if the Irish Book Awards ever introduce a new category for the fastest concept to printed book award, I think we're a shoo-in. So it's with all credit, thanks, and massive respect and admiration to our three extraordinary authors for pulling it all off. My job is just to facilitate the publication, and I am merely the publisher. All of the hard work, as ever, is always by the authors, and their level of commitment and professionalism is the best I've ever worked with, and the book has been a joy to work on, and it is one I'm hugely honoured to be involved in. And if I may just relate all of this back to the referendum campaign itself, it is hard to believe. It's hard for me to believe, now that I've seen these three individuals at work, that there were any doubts at all during those last 100 days that the result would be anything other than a yes. With Brian, Gráinne and Noel driving things on, we need never have worried. I also very quickly have to thank my own campaign team, if you will, of Catherine Kenny, Miles McKenna, Lisa Hyde and Peter O'Connell, without whom neither the book nor the extraordinary media coverage that we've had to date would have happened. So I hope you all enjoy the book, and please do spread the word. And if you haven't seen our jaunty little promo video for the book, please do check it out. It's on the Merriam Press YouTube channel, and I hope you enjoy that too. And thanks to the Pillar Room for having us tonight, and a special thanks to Carl Hayden for all of his help and support in organising the audio and other bits and pieces. So thank you, and thanks very much indeed.
You know, whenever I meet the kids these days and they sort of mention campaign, I'm always sort of saying to them that actually, you know, it wasn't a 6-month campaign or a year-long campaign or even a 2-year-long campaign. It's actually the culmination of a sort of 40-year campaign to achieve full equality under the law for LGBT people in this country. And that is true, and along the way, in those 40 years, a number of really incredible individuals played huge roles. However, when it came down to the final crunch, and we needed to mount a very specific campaign to get us over the finish line, I think we were incredibly lucky that there was 3 people who were willing to sort of do that, in a sense, on our behalf. Of course, we all helped out too, but they sort of marshaled us and guided us. And so the 3 people who I'm about to introduce now, they didn't just run a campaign, they ran a spectacular campaign. They actually managed to do something that's incredibly rare. They ran a pitch-perfect campaign. There wasn't a misstep, a single misstep along the way, or if there was, I didn't notice, so you're lucky. So I think we were incredibly lucky that we found these 3 people, or these 3 people found us, however you want to look at it. So I think the 3 people who wrote this book deserve an enormous amount of credit and gratitude, not just from the LGBTI community, but from Ireland as a whole. So please welcome Gráinne, Brian, and Noel.
Thank you. So many people here this evening. It's wonderful to see so many of you, so many of our wonderful yes equality people, so many people who really won the yes for us. But, you know, next Monday at 2:15, Catherine's opponent, Anne-Louise Gilligan, will actually be recognised as married in Ireland. And with them, so many other men and women who have waited many, many years to have their relationships recognised on an equal footing. And at the end of the day, yes, this is a book and the campaign was a win, but really that's what it was all about. That loving same-sex couples could have their relationships recognised in their own country. And at the end of the day, I think you know, that's what makes this such a wonderful occasion. I have a few thanks and then I'll hand over to my 2 colleagues. Firstly, to thank both of them.
Is that mine?
to thank Brian and Noel. The 3 of us have had an extraordinary journey, both through the campaign and indeed through writing the book. I can say that it has been an absolute pleasure to work with both of them. I also want to acknowledge somebody who managed to bring about a marriage of the impossible in the very early days, and that's Mark Kelly, who I think is probably not here this evening, from ICCL. And Mark managed to do a very good job on the matchmaking between Brian and myself. And that worked very well. But there are also, as Panti said, you know, this is a along the 100 days of the Yes Equality campaign was amazing, and so many of you were personally involved in it, and your friends and your family went out and you canvassed and you conversed and you won the vote. But it is also on, the shoulders of giants, people who've been working on LGBT rights for more than 30 years, and many of them are here this evening. And for myself, in terms of marriage equality, I want to just mention two particular people. Our board, many of them are here, but I want to mention Meninia Griffith and Andrew Hyland. Who are doing this work with other marriage equality champions when a lot of people thought it was rubbish and it would never work. And that's when the work is really, really tough. And finally, I want to thank my partner Patricia and all of my family who are here. Being the middle child of 7 is always a challenge. However, one of my brothers who was on a flight from London has ended up in Liverpool or somewhere, so he can't make it. But just to thank everybody for all the personal warmth and support, just to say this has been truly an experience of a lifetime, and I'm so proud that we managed to succeed in what we started in, and marriage equality will now be closing down. Thank you very much.
I suppose the very first thing to say here this evening is a huge thank you to somebody who's been a stalwart of all our campaigns over quite a long time, and who graces us here with her presence, the Queen of Ireland herself, Panti Bliss. And indeed to Ursula, who you'll hear shortly. Nobody will remember anything I say except we're going to Panti Bar afterwards. Just fix that in your heads and we're done. Well, that and hello to my sisters and my nephews and nieces. That's it. See, done, finished. The three of us are only here really as ciphers for the extraordinary work done by so many people over so many years, which reached a crescendo during the referendum campaign. People like Kieran Rose, Christopher Robson, Owen Collins, Susie Byrne, Arthur Leahy, all of those who took up the cudgels when, at the very beginning, David Norris, of course, who sends his apologies this evening, and stretching through the extraordinary work done by everyone involved in the 70 Yes Equality groups around the country, in the other organisations from trade unions to LGBT groups in Dublin, in Cork, and Dundalk, and Galway, and all over the country, to the children and youth organisations, the professional organisations, the employers, all who stood up for equality and who took to the doors night after night after night. That, I think, is the thing that floored us in head office, seeing the kind of work that was being done by people night after night after night. And as somebody said to me that I asked why, and they said, because I don't want this to be lost by one vote. And that was the motivation that drove people. I hope that you feel that we've managed to capture even a little glimmer of the kind of commitment, creativity and sheer hard work which people put in all across the country, again, night after night after night throughout the campaign. In particular, I'd like to single out and thank my colleagues in Glen, both the staff and the board, Davin, Emer, Sandra, Tiernan, Alan, Craig, Oren and Marie. And I'm probably going to be killed now because I've left. Oh, and Patrick. But he left us, so it's all right. But we've been working to bring, and the board, of course, who've been working to bring about equality that Panti mentioned earlier for LGBT people over the last 30 years. We've had great help from Atlantic Philanthropies over the last 10 years, but there's more to be done. And we'll need your support, and indeed we'll need your financial support, to ensure that the goodwill of the Irish people expressed on May the 22nd is carried through, to ensure that our families, our schools, our workplaces and our streets are safe and affirming and welcoming of LGBT people. So, to everybody who worked on the campaign, the teams from Marriage Equality, Mark Kelly and all at ICCL, Glenn, the HQ volunteers and staff, and everyone around the country who, in public and in private, in hundreds of thousands of conversations, changed Ireland. A huge thank you, and in particular, a huge thank you to Gráinne and to Noel. And I want to leave you one thing that moved me extraordinarily. I want to say thank you to this man here. Page something or other in the book. Buy the book and you'll see. He's a man called Vivian Sheehan. He's not a relation of mine. He's from Castletownbere, and he lived in Windy Arbor and Dundrum all his life. And Gráinne and I were out at the top of Grafton Street giving out the 500,000 yes badge. And we asked this man, would he like a badge? And he said, I would. And then I said to him, would you like the 500,000 badge? And he said, I would be delighted and I would be honoured to accept it. What we have done is change a country that an 85-year-old man can feel part of, an Ireland that's full of equality. You did that. Thank you.
Can I formally welcome the Deputy Lord Mayor of our city? Can I welcome Minister O'Riordan, Senator Sapone, and I'm sure others who I can't see in my eye line, such as the crowd. Although the first draft had to be written within 6 weeks, and it had to be published within 6 months, and it was limited to 60,000 words, we had high hopes for this book. We hoped we could write something of significance in political science about modern politics, current day campaigning, and the Irish referendum process. We hoped we could write a useful handbook for those who want to message, mobilise, and move hearts for positive political and social reforms in Ireland and abroad. We hoped, and we could only hope, that we could capture some of the flavour of the human magic you were all responsible for all through the country. From Panti to Passage East, from Gráinne to Ballyferter, from Galway back to government buildings, it was just one hell of an extraordinary political and social movement. We can only hope to have captured a flavour in this book. Personally, I hope it amounts to a thank you for my wife, and in later years when he can read it, an explanation to my son for why I spent more time with Brian and Gráinne than I did with either of them in the first half of this year. But I hope too, he and she will understand even more why it mattered and why it was significant. Personally, I hope the book does something to represent a fraction of the contribution which Gráinne Healy has made to academia now, to social justice for a long time, and to the achievement over a decade of marriage equality. Personally, I hope that it communicates to Brian Sheehan something many of us have tried to do, but it's very hard to break it through. I hope it communicates to him what a significant leader he has been for his community for a decade and a half, and how he can really be a national leader. I have two final hopes. I hope, because of the efforts of Catherine Marsh, who helped us diligently with the editing and tried to put sense on what started with some incoherence of the three voices. I hope, because of the efforts of Seamus Dooley, and Kathleen Hunt and Donald Cronin, who helped us, who read the early drafts for us. I hope, because of the wonderful work that Marion Press, Connor and his team did on this book, and they've already established themselves now with a long tradition of publishing great history books, with publishing great politics books. I hope for them and for all whose story is reflected in it. I hope it's in every green Christmas stocking, red Christmas stocking, and rainbow Christmas stocking in the land. I have one last hope. I hope that as a follow-on from the referendum, as telling part of the story of that extraordinary campaign, together with work that Carl Hayden and Jan McDonough are doing in documenting the campaign, and extraordinary stuff that I know Charlie Bird is going to produce during the course of next year about the stories that were involved in the campaign. I hope this book can make a contribution to a process of realization, a process of recognition, and maybe even a process of reconciliation between, and it's not going to be between anymore, but from those and with those who for too long were locked out, were excluded, were left out, and those of us who for too long, through attitude or indifference, failed to see it. I hope this book begins to tell even more of that story. Thank you.
Triumvirate there. I think if you look up the word troika or triumvirate on Wikipedia now, a picture of them pops up. The word inspiring is, I think, overused and overabused these days. If Beyonce leaves the house without her makeup on, she's inspiring. But occasionally that word is absolutely apropos. And during the Yes Equality campaign, there were countless moments that were truly inspiring and countless people who were truly inspiring. For me personally, one of the big ones was every time I went on a canvass, whether it was in Ranelagh or County Meath, for God's sakes, I would meet these people who were on the canvass, gay and straight, old and young, who were out there every single night for weeks on end, knocking on people's doors. And in particular, I was struck by how many straight people were involved in doing it, who weren't doing it because they were personally invested. They were doing it for their family members, for their sons, or for their daughters, their cousins, or their neighbours. And I was constantly blown away by that. But along the way in the campaign, a number of other individuals made what you might call spectacular interventions in the campaign. Interventions that I think went a long way to helping push this through. President Mary Robinson, for example, Mary McAleese, let me get my female president mixed up. Mary McAleese's contribution was spectacular, but a much more personal intervention was made by a lot of people, and some of those stories I think really helped to sort of change hearts and minds and maybe explain what the campaign was really about to people who'd never really put that much thought into it before. And perhaps the biggest and most impactful of those personal interventions was made by our next speaker. Please welcome Ursula Halligan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Taoiseach, friends, brothers and sisters. Earlier this year, when the government announced that they were going to hold a referendum on marriage equality, I had absolutely no intention whatsoever of speaking out about myself. None. I was in the deepest of darkest denials. I had locked myself into a prison of fear and shame. Honestly, I had given up any hope of being set free. So I had mixed emotions when the campaign started. Deep down, I wished the yes side well, but I didn't really believe that marriage equality could ever really happen, because nothing in my life experienced social change on that scale had ever happened. So it was very hard for me to imagine that it could become real. I had stopped dreaming. Publicly, I reacted to the referendum campaign as a detached observer might do. After all, it had nothing really to do with me. I was in denial. But as the campaign got going, things changed. I changed. I changed because of people like Gráinne Healy, Brian Sheehan, and Noel Whelan. I admired their quiet determination and calm composure. I liked the respectful way they engaged with opponents and the generosity of the spirit they showed. I changed too because of people like many of you here tonight who spent your lives slugging away for the rights of the rest of us. You did it for years. You did it in the wilderness, in a much more closed Ireland than now, when it wasn't cool, and you did it with boundless courage. By comparison, I'm just a Johnny-come-lately who jumped on board 6 days before the vote. Together with Gráinne, Brian and Noel, you are my heroes of the marriage equality referendum. You didn't stop dreaming. You changed me. Looking back, I can see now how the yes side created the space that allowed me feel safe to raise my head above the wall. I was also greatly inspired by Mary McAleese, the bravery of her son Justin, and before him, Leo Varadkar and Pat Carey. Brick by brick, you, the Yes campaigners, built the road that I and others would eventually choose to walk on. If you hadn't pushed for the referendum, if you hadn't debated in public, if Leo, Justin and Pat hadn't told their stories, I would probably have stayed in the grey safety of my prison cell and, like so many before me, quietly gone to my grave without saying a word about it in public. The holding of the referendum forced me to confront the issue head on. But you, all of you, helped me to do the rest. I didn't find it easy. Even writing the words gay or lesbian about myself was enough to start an outbreak of squirming and cringing. I persisted because I hoped that if I told my story well, if I told it absolutely truthfully and honestly, people might better understand what it is like to be gay. And then my piece appeared in the Irish Times. A few days afterwards, I came across a line from a poem that stopped me dead in my tracks because for me it summed up the amazing public reaction. It read, "What if one woman told the truth about her life? The world would split open." In a way, that's what happened when the Irish Times published my article. The big heart of Ireland split wide open. A tsunami of love, empathy and acceptance came gushing out. I will never forget the hundreds of beautiful messages I received, many echoing my own experience, and I am grateful for every single one of them. I know the response I received was replicated all over the country in towns and cities where others also told their stories. All of us who told our stories spoke from the heart, and the Irish people replied in kind when they went out to vote. It was an emotional time. The relief was enormous. Many of us shed a tear. I certainly did. The genius of the Yes campaign was to turn the referendum into a national heart-to-heart conversation and replace abstract arguments with real human beings on both sides of the argument. It softened hearts. It melted the hard-hearted. Suddenly, them became us, others became ourselves. It was a magical time. We saw each other as flesh and blood human beings with feelings before anything else. Now, none of this just happened by chance. It happened because a small group of dedicated people sat down to make it happen. They did the research, they learned from campaigns abroad, and crucially, they decided to persuade, not to rant. They refused to take the easy way, to demonize those who disagreed with them. And that's not an easy thing to do. The instinct to hit back is irresistible sometimes, especially when it's rooted in a deep sense of injustice. And I know, for years I felt a burning sense of injustice, as I imagine most gay people did. Crucially, though, the yes side resisted the temptation to lash out. They treated their opposition as human beings, not bigots. They treated them as they themselves wished to be treated. They knew that many no or undecided voters were decent, good living people who were understandably cautious about making any radical change to the conventional family or to the kind of society they were used to. So the yes side started where their opponents were, not from where they would like them to be. They sought to find common ground. They sought to understand their concerns. They ditched adversarial tactics. They realized that many of the things no voters valued were the same things yes voters valued too. Things like family. The yes side called itself the Family Values Campaign. After reading the book, a government minister confided to me that politicians could learn a thing or two from what they did. I know I did. In a very real way, this book marks a watershed. But we must never forget what happened before that watershed. That's because we're the lucky ones. We reached the finishing line. Many didn't make it. There were casualties. I am haunted by the number of people who came up to me on the street telling me about friends or family members who took their lives because they couldn't cope with being gay. Or maybe more accurately, because society convinced them that society couldn't cope with them being gay. But thanks to you, we're now in a different Ireland, a rainbow Ireland, an Ireland of equals. And thanks to you, future generations of children won't suffer the way we suffered. For anyone interested in how to effect radical social change, this book is an essential read. And it is my great honour and privilege to be here with you tonight to launch it with my brothers and sisters. I thank you. Thank you.
Ursula's piece in Irish Times literally made me fall in love with her, and I think the same went for everybody in the country. And I think it was so powerful because it's impossible to vote against somebody that you are deeply in love with. And God knows, Ursula, if you haven't gotten laid since May 22nd, it's not what you want to want.